Well, Arcane Season 2 is officially in the wraps, and I got a lot to talk about in this video that will be first a non-spoiler review of Season 2, and then a heavy spoiler review into my feelings, thoughts, and just overall critiques of Arcane Season 2. And I'm going to be honest, this ain't going to be fun because I had high hopes for this. Let's talk about it. That's right. Arcane Season 2 and the second and final season of Arcane hit Netflix this month, and with each weekend we got 3-episode acts, much like Season 1, that finally culminated last night in a 3-episode drop that will leave a lot of people having a lot of different feelings. A non-spoiler review for this is that the animation from Fortiche is stunning, unbelievable, and some of the best you could have throughout any type of animation medium. It was creative, and it very much can carry the series for a lot of people. The action throughout, also very engaging and very impressive animated wise by Fortiche. But for me, the story, the writing, and the whole entire pacing of the show is incredibly off. And for a show in Season 1 that was almost near perfection, if not pure perfection, Season 2 has taken a gigantic step back in the wildest ways when it comes to character storytelling, when it comes to character building, and overall fundamental issues of just pacing to begin with. Arcane Season 2 for a lot of people may become one of their favorite things, but for me, Arcane Season 2 is one of my biggest disappointments when it comes to movie and TV in quite a long time and quite all time. I think that this is something that you don't have to watch to enjoy Arcane. Season 1 is what it was, but for me, Season 2 is an extremely disappointing follow-up that lost the plot in a lot of different ways and what made Arcane Season 1 great, and just wasn't able to hold itself through, and does actually, in my opinion, damage the overall image this series has as an amazing show on Netflix produced by Riot Games, and just one of the best animated shows of all time. My rating for it is sadly going to be a bronze, though you could argue a silver or gold just based off animation alone, but the storytelling, the pacing, the character building, all was so big failures for me that I'm having to give this very low rating. But if you are not buying into what I'm saying and you want to go check out Arcane, go ahead. And if you want to hear exactly why I'm giving this a bronze rating for Season 2, stick around here as we go into the spoiler review section of Arcane Season 2, where I give all my thoughts and critiques on why this season does not work at all for me. Well, if you're sticking around, again, spoiler warning, we are moving on to the spoiler review of Arcane Season 2. And like I said in my non-spoiler part, I absolutely love Season 1. I'm somebody who comes from this game world, so I'm attached to these characters in different ways. And I'm not somebody coming at this that, lore needs to be attained. I hate the idea of lore in canon. A good story tells a good story no matter what it is. And unfortunately for me in Season 2, there was not much good storytelling happening. A lot of the conversation outside of the show has been about why was this a Season 2? Riot and the writers are saying this was a planned 2-season show. This is exactly what they wanted to do. That there is no rushing to other projects and that there is no worried that this was taking too long. But I cannot believe that for the rest of my life, because this season was like 2 or 3 seasons jam-packed together, and so many different characters and moments were just felt so rushed and not lived up to and not fleshed out well enough to make me enjoy this. I felt these last 3 episodes, especially midway through episode 8, I've been doing a reaction series, and I just turned off the reaction recording because it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be nice. And instead of focusing all my time trying to have commentary, on the show. I just wanted to take in the final 2 episodes myself. That way I can think, is this really as bad as I thought it was? And the simple answer was, yes, it was. We have wild character turns with people like Victor, with people like Jinx, even Caitlin Vi in some areas. Mel's whole story feels like it's something that should be in a completely different season. It's so rushed and gone over. We don't really know who in Bessa, how she had the child. We just know that Mel is this mage that was, attached to this Black Rose character who, again, as a person of the game, I know as LeBlanc, but we didn't get to see that at all. Like, we show this shadowy figure, and it just leaves an overall dissatisfied taste in my mouth when it comes to anything to do with the Black Rose, as well as Mel and Mbessa. Then, like I mentioned before, Victor's turn. Victor was so important to the end of the season, but he wasn't involved in that much of the season. He had a brief appearance in Act 1, Season 2. He only showed up really at the very end of Act 2, Episode 2, and then Act 2, Episode 3. And then after that, he turns into this godlike corrupted figure that becomes the big bad of Arcane, trying to take over the Hex Gates and cause epic mass destruction, post-apocalyptic world type stuff that we saw through honestly a very good but very poorly timed and poorly placed a standalone episode where we got to see 2 different worlds between Heimerdinger and Echo and Jace. And Heimerdinger and Echo being in the world that, what if Vi died during the initial heist of Jace's apartment building, and Jace going to the apocalyptic world of what happens if Victor wins. I think these are interesting ideas to do in their own episodes or to be fleshed out more, but I also take a lot of criticism with the idea of the alternate universes being released so late into a show. And while emotional moments probably will hit for a lot of people when it comes to Powder in that world and what the world was like if Vi passed away and Powder stayed true, I just don't like this world that was there. It didn't make any sense. Why is it all fancy now? Because the underground, was it really going to progress that type of a way, and the Topsides culture was going to find its way to the Undercity? I don't think so. Having Silco be there with Vander forgiven. Remember, Silco was heads deep in Shimmer and was going to be using Shimmer way before Jinx became a thing and way before Hextech was being involved. Again, I don't see a world where he is healed up and is ever working perfectly fine with Vander and there's no Shimmer in sight. This show, with some of its flashbacks, with some of its alternate universe stuff, is retconning basic ideas that they set up in Season 1 and not thinking it well through. I do appreciate seeing Clagger and Milo living in that spot, and I do appreciate a more softer version of Powder and her relationship with Echo that isn't going off the deep end. That all worked, but it was everything around that did not make sense in that world to try to be pointing as that, like, oh, if this happened this way, everything would have worked out so nice in this other world. Because it just didn't make sense given the story that we saw in the first season of Arcane. Whether or not the Hextech became, found, this was very clearly going to end in some type of Civil War scenario with just Silco himself making a lot of power moves and planning to make a power move against Vander. It didn't need the actual Hextech or anything like that at all. Then we go on to just the Rush storylines. I'm talking about Caitlyn and Vi's whole relationship this season. The season starts with Caitlyn in a very high rage fury. In Act 1, I would say her arc was probably the best of any character this season, turning into the martial law head, manipulated by Embessa Medarda. But Act 2 kind of forgoes any of that interesting build there. Kate goes back to being more softer, not trusting in Bessa, and we don't even get to see, Zahn being taken over by Noxus. We don't even get to see any of the struggles happening overall, and we don't even get to see much of, even Vi's character descent. We get a video music montage, but there's not much else there being seen with these characters branching out into deeper storylines. The idea of Caitlyn becoming, the martial law leader, Commander Caitlyn, in Act 1, and the effects it was going to take place all over, Zahn and Piltover, could have been its own act, and probably should have been its own act altogether there. But instead, we had to rush and go forward with a storyline featuring, a resurrected Vander in a monster's body, and we lost a lot of that build from Act 1. I do appreciate seeing Aisha kind of tether down Jinx and allow her to be a pillar that has changed Jinx for the good. But I do not like the idea that, Jinx was this unstable emotional character, and even after Aisha's death, she's thinking more of suicide rather than just going into her crazy form. I know that can kind of make sense for the character, but I also, in some ways, disabled Jinx and took her from what felt like a Harley Quinn Joker, angry type build that we got in the very first season of Arcane into a more good individual character that was dealing with emotional flaws. And some of the things with the logic around, Jinx and the Act 3 was absurd to me. Vi being why would you put my sister in a cell? She murdered easily over a dozen people, if not more, in this series alone. Yeah, she should be put in prison because of that. Why are you questioning Kate because of that? It's one of the most stupid things I've heard from Vi, and it just highlights some of the bad writing we got throughout the season. The best thing about season 1 is the writing was critical thinking all the way around. It was nuanced, it was well thought out, it felt natural, it felt flowing. Season 2's writing, a lot of times the lines just felt very bland, very flat, and very just poor overall. And it's just highlighted throughout the whole entire season in multiple moments where you're just what? What's happening with that? Another great example is Victor and Jace. When Victor first comes out of his cocoon, we get not even 5 minutes of line, we get 2 minutes of line between Victor and Jace, and Victor's just our paths have ended. Goodbye, Jace. And Jace is just there huh? That's the storyline. And Victor's whole storyline itself needed to almost be its own season, its own fully fleshed out, put time in season, because he goes from being a beacon of hope, somebody that you're seeing doing a lot of positive work, into just completely mob boss, raid boss, the big bad of the season. And I don't think it was earned with how rushed it was, with how much we didn't see, and how much work wasn't built into Victor's character being corrupted in a negative way. It just did not work at all. So at the end, when Victor is almost getting his timeline, when everybody is being touched by Victor now, when Jace is his last, is struggling and failed to get to Victor at this point, it just didn't matter to me because I felt like we did not build well to this character having this moment. This turn did not work. This turn did not get the episodes and the time needed to breathe for this to feel natural, for this to feel right. Instead, it felt rushed that we needed to end this season. We needed to end this story so we can move on, from Ryan's perspective, onto other stories we want to tell. Arcane Season 2 should have been at least 2 seasons, if not 3. And that's a video I plan on making on how I would fix Arcane Season 2 and how I would turn it into a multi-season show and how this could absolutely work. I think the idea of Warwick and Singe's creation, again, rushed overall. The flashback with Vander, it didn't make sense for Silco and Vander to be so close, in my opinion, to Powder and Violet's mom, because from what we see in Season 1, Powder and Violet were like the very bottom of the poor of the Undercity, and here are 2 friends that were definitely not that at the time. Vander already showing that he is at least working at the last drop of not owning it. Why aren't they having them live in better scenarios? Why is Silco not mentioning the fact that he knew Jinx's mother from back in the day as manipulation tools? This was just a retcon to try to make a fun moment that just didn't make sense when you actually think about the story they set up in Season 1. Finally, for a lot of people, the music videos and the music of the season is one of their favorite things. I have a friend who absolutely loves music, who thinks that the music videos, and it is for them, working so well on one of their favorite things in the season. But for me, there are so many moments in this season, whether it be start of episodes, whether it be different moments in episodes where we're just getting blanket music videos, and not even just short, but like long music videos to quote unquote tell the story, that I just think you're losing a lot of moments and a lot of character dialogue moments that I think are needed to produce a better story. Again, you look back to Season 1, the only episode that had any type of music video to start was episode 7. And even that had, I think, a very good quick dialogue between us rediscovering Echo and Vi. But this season consistently started with music video with very limited dialogue to start every episode, and for me it just took me out and took me away from what works so much in Arcane. Whether it's the Mel flashback in episode 8 of Season 1, whether it's the amazing introduction to Silco's character and what happened to Vander, and just his speech in Season 1, Episode 3. Whether it's the introduction to Jace in Season 1, Episode 2. There are so much good that comes from, these early introductory, almost flashbacky type things that Arcane did in Season 1 that got completely thrown away for music videos in Season 2, and I absolutely despised it. I thought it was lazy writing. To me, it was Riot being like, oh, they loved the music. Oh, they liked Episode 7. Oh, we need to do it in every episode. Oh, they liked our 10 tracks from Season 1. Well, we gotta give them 20 in Season 2. And it just overpopulated and overflooded what was already a crammed up story and crammed up season. Oh my goodness. What else can I talk about? Oh, the lack of good side characters build. When you looked at the Enforcer gang that we saw and some characters that were laced throughout Season 2, what were we thinking? I know Maddie had more of that evil turn, being a spy of Noxus, which, again, I don't think makes sense when you look about the whole entire episode of things for Arcane, but again, maybe that's something that's more fleshed out if they're able to widen up the story. Like, when does Ambessa start meeting with Maddie? When does she start becoming loyal to Maddie? It's just kind of thrown in there in the 9th episode as like ooh, that's what Maddie was all along. And it just kind of gave Maddie, who was the best written of these characters, not great writing overall. I think Loris was the Vander-looking one, which I don't know why they made him look like Vander so much. So many people thought he'd be related to Vander. But he died in episode 9, and he was just somebody that, I just do not think was written very well. You don't learn anything about him. He's just there to kind of be a bounce-off for Vi sometimes. It was extremely poor writing, and then you have the third guy who doesn't really speak a line in the whole entire season. I don't think he speaks any line. Again, you look back to Season 1, there are so many side characters that were built out, whether it was Milo and Clagger, whether it was even Benzo, the sheriff from the first 3 acts. You look at any of the counselors, throughout season 1 that might have died, Caitlyn's mom. So many smaller side characters were built out well and given up lines and with a slower story were being built up and they felt like characters that were needed. These characters did not get that treatment at all, and it was, again, a sign of things being so rushed that makes me wonder, did we need these characters in this season of the show? Like, if we lost Loris, Maddie, and the other guy, would this have mattered? Episode 3 this season, in season 2, Vi tells them to go away so they take on Jinx, so it's not even like they're present for that battle. You could have had blanket enforcers being there for any of the Undercity invasion angle. You didn't need these crew. And again, Loris and Maddie and this other fella didn't really add much else to the story or warranted them being a extra additional character. You didn't need to have somebody betray Caitlyn, I feel. You could have written a better way to get her mano-a-mano with Mbessa in that final fight. It was nice to see Maddie die, obviously. People thought, her as the home wrecker, the one who was staying with Caitlyn after, as she was the commander Caitlyn, the martial law leader, being influenced by Mbessa. But it just doesn't make much sense overall. And these characters were just not written well at all and warranted that individual screen time or for me to care about them at all. So Vika, again, was a character who took a major backseat throughout this season, and she's somebody who I thought was going to be a more interesting player. She has a big part in episode 2. We see her in episode 9, and she's also kind of around in episode 4. But outside of those episodes, and I guess episode 3 and Act 2, she doesn't have that big of a ploy. She doesn't have that big of a character moment or play. Again, it's a lot of montaging for her when she comes in after episode 3 or in episode 4. And it was just another character that wasn't written well and wasn't written half as good as she was in season 1 or given as much to do in season 1. There's just so many complaints I have, and I need to go more into what I think can work for this season. But the Vander Warwick stuff felt very rushed for me. I didn't get that emotional moment like some people did. The Isha death was very telegraphed for me. So while that was beautiful in its own mind, again, it was so telegraphed that it didn't leave that big of an impact for me as much as other people. And again, this third act that came out today, these last 3 episodes, were so jam-packed with, I felt, bad story writing and writing that didn't match what they had in season 1, and just things that didn't need to be there or were rushed up too soon, or because we had a whole standalone alternate universe episode for 7, it created episode 8 and episode 9 carrying almost a season's worth of content in 2 episodes, and for me it fell flat on its face. I will forever be sad and disheartened that Arcane Season 2 completely flopped in my books. Now, I'm glad that other people are enjoying this, and if you did enjoy it, tell me in the comments down below. There's nothing wrong with enjoying something that somebody else doesn't, but I'm interested to see what everybody's thoughts are in the comments, because some will be positive and be respectful for the people who are positive. Some will be negative, like myself, and be respectful for the people who might have more negative opinions. And there'll be some people in between. But it's clear to say for me that Arcane Season 2 is something that will be a forever smudge on the Arcane name, at least on a larger scale sense. Whether it's my view or others, this is very clearly not what people were hoping for with after a top tier near perfective season 1, and it does not give me hope for Riot Games and any other adaptations or shows that they want to get to, because this was rushed, this was not well thought out, and this was a perfect example of somebody up top wanting to get to something else. So what was currently there suffered severely in a lot of aspects. But I'll see you guys in another video, and I look forward to reading and discussing your comments in my comment section down below. And like and subscribe for more Arcane Season 2 commentary, like what I would have done to fix or what I would do to properly, build out this Arcane storyline over 2 or 3 more seasons. But yeah, I'll see you later.